Welcome to the Blue Collar Nation podcast, the podcast dedicated to making the lives of home service professionals better. Now join Eric and Larry to talk about all things home service.
We got Larry and Eric here from Super Tech University. We got Andrew taking a walk too. He's going to wave to the Facebook world. We're going to have a really cool talk today. I'm very excited because we've been having some great conversations with many people, and the super profit community has been a wonderful way for us to talk about Super Tech University and bring great information to everybody. So if anybody is on, we have a lot of people here in the Zoom room, which is wonderful. And we have different people in the super profit community that are going to be watching. And what are we going to be talking about today, Eric? Why don't you warm everybody up?
Yeah, we're going to talk about sales based on people's generation and how it differs from generation to generation. So, look, you can't treat every single sales call exactly the same. You can't treat every potential client and teach them the same things in the same ways. And we're going to differentiate between those so that we can close more deals. Because, look, I've been hearing a lot lately. People are slower than they like to be, and for whatever reason. And you and I lived through that. We lived through, our business went through the Great Recession, and every single service call counts, right? It's easy when you're getting you're getting more calls in than you can do the work, right? That's like shooting fish in a barrel. But all of a sudden, when things start to tighten up, and I hope it isn't tightening up for everybody, but I'm hearing quite a few people that it is, that's when you got to dig in and be better and be good at what you do. And you and I had to learn very quickly that every single service call, we need to get a job out of that. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Not just the service call, it's the sales, but it's the presentation of your service. It's the delivery of the service. It's dealing with things afterwards. If there's a problem or if there's a compliment, getting invoices and staying in touch with your clients, because every single client counts as well in the same scenarios. It's very important.
Yeah.
So,
all right, well, let's get into it for a few minutes, do 15, 20 minutes, and hopefully we can add some value to some people, right? So here's the reality check for most of us. We're probably leaving money on the table with some of our technicians or ourselves, right? We have 4 distinct generations that we're selling to right now. Baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Z, and millennials and Gen Z, right? And they like to be communicated differently, and they're different. So let me explain kind of who they are and how much most of us work in homes, right? 38% of all homes in the United States are owned by baby boomers, which is age 61 to 79. That's our oldest group of people, right? 31% of the homes are owned by Gen X, which is age 45 to 60. 26% of the homes are owned by millennials, 29 to 44. Roughly 5% of the homes are Gen Z, age 13 to 28. So the older Gen Z are starting to buy houses, right? All 4 of those groups, we cannot try to sell the same way. They operate differently. They come from different generations. They communicate differently. So we have to understand what they value, right? So let's talk baby boomers, right? So that's basically early 60s and above, right? Trust and credibility are everything for them, right? Your brand, how long you've been around, that that their neighbors know you and use you and like you, right? It's much more interpersonal with the older generation. They're going to prefer to talk on the phone versus to have to do things digitally, right? They didn't grow up with computers and cell phones and all that stuff. So they're going to want also on the phone, that feels more personal than getting a text or getting a DM or a Loom video or whatever, right? And they respect authority and expertise, right? This is the generation that remembers what being a craftsman or a craftsperson was, so that they're searching for that at all times. They value quality over price, right? Baby boomers are one of the richest generations in the history of the world, right? They are not as price sensitive; they're quality sensitive, right? They're not going to decide whether to use you or not use you until you've built rapport with them. They don't want you to run in and just start trying to hammer them with a sale right away. They want to get to know you a little bit. They want to get a feel for you. Much more one to one, right? Much more of that face to face communication. And they want written documentation. When I say that, look, we're using generalities too, right? It's not like every single person that age doesn't want, things digitally, but generally speaking, they want it in writing. And when they mean that, they mean on paper, right? So, how am I going to sell to that person? I'm going to lead with our credentials, right? If I'm an IICIC certified restoration firm, I'm going to be leading with that. I'm going to be leading with any awards we have, or our Google ratings, or whatever that might be, right? I'm going to slow down and be thorough. Little older, want a little time. I'm going to be more formal with my baby boomers than I would with a millennial or Gen Z, right? Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith, I'm going to be very respectful. I'm not going to use slang. I'm not going to use profanity. I'm going to be professional every step of the way, right? I'm going to give them something in writing. They want me to leave something. I want to leave them a trifold, a business card, some sort of written quote, whatever it might be, right? I'm going to follow up on the phone, not via text or email. I'm going to pick up the phone and call them, right? Why? Because they want that interpersonal communication. And then if I could do all of those things, I probably have a pretty good chance at getting them to buy. So now we move on to our next generation, Generation X, right? That's 1965 to 1980. So that's what, like, I don't know, 45 to 60 years old, something along those lines, right? This group, self reliant, do it yourself mentality. They were the first generation that were the latchkey kids. Both parents worked for the first time. So they're home alone, figuring things out. Their parents were letting them figure things out because they were busy in their own right. Because of some of that and some of the things that happened in their youth, they're deeply skeptical of salespeople, right? They're going to research you before they ever call you, so that they are more technologically advanced than baby boomers, generally speaking. So they're going to do a bunch of research on their own, right? It's that whole self reliance, do it yourself. They're going to go do that research on their own. They're going to want facts, not fluff or hype. They're not going to buy into that at all. That will not work. They respond to email and direct communication, right? Meaning phone. And they make decisions quickly once they trust you, right? So, like Larry was kind of intimating to earlier, you got to build rapport with them. That usually happens face to face on a bid, right? So, how do we sell to Gen X? We be direct and we skip the pitch, right? We don't always need to pitch with them. Like, if they've already done their homework, I'm even going to say, hey, Larry, looks like you've already done your homework. Let me cut the crap here. Let me get the main things that you want to learn about, right? And if I can do that, they're like, awesome. Those are the things I wanted to know, right? So I'm going to be direct with them. I'm going to back every claim with data. If they're doing a lot of research, they're going to want information. Well, I better be prepared to give them information to prove to them if they're skeptical. We already know they're skeptical by nature. I have to prove all this stuff, right? I'm going to acknowledge their research. I'll be like, wow, hey, you really did your homework. This makes it a lot easier for me, right? Well, because they pride themselves on doing their homework. So I'm going to acknowledge that, right? That's a kudo to them. I'm going to show them that. I'm going to give them control, right? They're at that age where they're still young enough to be in total control and they have the money to back that up. So they want to be in control of their house and the situation. I'm going to have to give that to them, right? If I'm going to email a proposal, which you guys all know I don't like, right? Anybody that's followed me for, like, I want to give that proposal in person. But whatever it is, whether you are going to email or do it in person, you better do it fast. They're going to want to move. They're going to, if they've done all the research and already had you at the house, you better be able to come in with a proposal quick, or you're going to lose it. They're going to find somebody who will. Right. And look, the biggest thing I think with Gen X is you can't oversell and then underdeliver. You need to do it the other way around. You've got to undersell and over deliver. And then if that's the case, because they put so much time, energy, and effort in, they're going to then reward you with telling all their friends and using you over and over. Right. All right. Millennials. So basically, millennials would be 30 to 45 years old, roughly 29 to 30, 45. Right? Reviews and social proof for their decision filter, right? They're the first generation that really grew up with having the phone with them a lot, like most of their life. So they're going to be much more digital than the first two groups that we spoke about, right? They value transparency over price alone, right? They want to know that you're not like trying to pull the wool over their eyes, right? Millennials and Gen Z, because they've spent so much time online and being marketed to, they have a very highly tuned bullshit meter, right? You cannot try to pull the wool over their eyes. They are going to recognize transparency and authenticity, and we have to deliver on those fronts, right? They prefer text and email more than phone calls, right? So millennials are the first group that or Larry and I were a little older that we dealt with. That like they don't want a phone call. Just text me, just email me. I'm busy. Okay, cool, fair enough, right? They emotionally invest in home projects. Look, a lot of millennials, if they're in their early 30s, they're probably in their first home. They might not know a lot about that, what's going on in the house. They're going to rely on us as contractors, right? They're going to need guidance. They're first time homeowners. And they're so emotionally involved in the house because houses are so incredibly expensive today. They had to do a lot to be able to buy one. So they're going to be way, way invested in the process. And us as contractors, we need to acknowledge that and work around it, right? And then for them, brand story and company values matter more so than before. It used to be reputation with the two or older groups, right? Like, oh, hey, XYZ company has a great reputation. People say great things about them. They've been around for 40 years. Now it's more about like, what's the mission and purpose of this company? What are their values? What does their brand look like? Right? Millennials are going to be more moved by those things than how long something's been around. Right. So what we're going to have to do there is we have to tweak how we're going to talk to them, right? So I'm going to start, referencing my reviews more than I might with an older client. I'm going to be like, hey, pull up, we were living out in California. Yelp was king, at least then, right? I'm going to pull up Yelp. Hey, look at all these 5-star Yelp reviews we have. Oh, look at all these Google reviews we have, right? We're going to show social proof because that's what a millennial will want, right? If I'm doing a job, like we did restoration jobs, those are 3, 4, 5 days or more. I'm going to be texting them proactively all along the way with, hey, this is what's going on, right? Or even if it's during the sales process, I'm going to keep in contact with them, texting them. Larry's super good about this. He's not going to let time fade. He's going to stay on it, right? I'm going to be transparent about the process. I'm not going to try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. And they'll figure that out really quickly. I just this is exactly what it's going to look like, right? I'm going to speak to the bigger picture, especially a new homeowner, right? I can fix that one thing, but what if that one thing's going to affect 5 other things down the road? They're going to want me to speak to those 5 other things. They may not buy everything or do all the work right then, but give them that bigger picture so that you can build trust with them. And then make your follow-up digital, right? Send them a recap text or email with photos, before and after documentation. Because what they're going to do is they're going to start sharing that stuff to their network, right? They live online. Like I know for me, I mean, I'm not a millennial, but like one of my favorite things is when my automobile goes into the shop and they send me that whole video explanation and show me every single thing that needs work. Like they show me the rotor is warped and I could see it right in the video. And I'm like, cool, they're not lying to me. There it is, right? Like this is what millennials want. They want that kind of digital follow-up that makes their life easier or makes the decision process easier. We need to adapt to make sure that we can give that, right? And Then we got Gen Z, right? All right, they only own about 5% of the houses now, but that's going to change rapidly, right? They're going to start heading into their 30s, the older ones. And they're the first group of people who are completely digitally native. Most of them grew up with a cell phone since they were little kids. They've done everything online, guys. So if you haven't, you have to recognize that about them and think about how that changes the buying process. I did a class with a coaching client this morning with his whole sales team. We were talking a lot about selling to Gen Z and how different it is. They value different things because they grew up online, right? Speed is everything. They want instant answers, right? What's their whole life? They text somebody and somebody texts them right back. They go on Amazon and order something right now and the package comes the next day, right? Like they're getting, they don't know the answer to something and they go on Google and get the answer like that, right? We have to match that speed to sell to them or they won't buy, right? They're hyper aware of in being inauthentic. It's hard to say. Um, yeah, they can sniff that out a mile away. Like my kids are Gen Z, and like they'll see something online and be like, "That's fake," or "That's real," or like they just like boom, 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 and I'm like, I couldn't tell if that's fake or real or whatever. Like they can pick out a scam, they can pick out a fake image or AI. Like these guys are really good at this. So we have to make sure we're good. They're going to do their research on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. They're going to go online, social media, video to find out all about it, right? They're value driven. They want companies that have a real purpose. They want to know that that company, I don't know, is reinvesting in the community or is donating to an animal shelter, right? They want to know that that company isn't there just to make money and nothing else, that there's a bigger picture or bigger play with that company. It's very important to Gen Z. They're comfortable with video and digital tools, so we need to make sure that we're using those tools with them. And because they're young, I'm not everybody, right? But they're super price conscious. They also grew up where, oh, I can see that on a shelf for $10, but I can go on Amazon and get it for 7, right? So they're used to doing comparison shopping because they had a digital tool to find prices. So they kind of commoditize things that maybe still shouldn't be a commodity because they're not looking at the quality aspect of that, right? And that was one of the big things in my class this morning. The guys who are out there selling to them are like, they're not discerning enough to figure out yet who does good work and who doesn't. They're just very driven by price. So we have to make sure that we are showing some doubt that just a cheap price isn't exactly what you want, right? Usually that would start with a conversation. So is price the only thing you're concerned about? And then they're going to say, no, yeah. And then you're like, okay, so if I give you a super cheap price, but I do the whole job wrong, would that be okay? Well, no. Oh, okay. So quality's part of the equation too, right? Now I'm working them into getting them to recognize that no, it's not just price. So we have to be able to do that as well. But I think the biggest thing is we just have to know how to sell to each group, right? So like Gen Z, we'll finish with these guys. Get to the point fast. They're used to everything being lightning fast. We can't slow down. We got to get to the point quick. Their attention span's shorter too. I think all of our attention spans are shorter nowadays, but theirs is really short. You got to get on stick right away. Have to be 100% authentic. Everything we give them needs to be digital, right? Digital quote, e-signature, text updates, before and after photos. Like they don't want me handing them a piece of paper. To them, that's like you're losing credibility, right? Acknowledge their financial pressure. Like, hey, I get it, life's expensive right now. You're just starting out, right? Like just by saying that and acknowledging it and maybe giving them some options that are more economy driven, if that's what they need, they're going to appreciate that from you, right? And then don't be afraid to show the company story. Hopefully, your company has a cool story. Larry and I had a whole company history that we used to teach all of our team members so that if the people wanted to talk about our company, our team knew what to talk about, right? That we went through the Great Recession, and that we used to do trash outs on REOs, and that I lived in the shop for 2 years to save money. And like all those things, they add up to an interesting story that people will resonate with. Find out what your story is, or figure out a story and tell that. And then, of all of them, invite them to share their experience online, right? So once you've done the work and they're happy, they're the most apt to go put information out as far as reviews. So make sure that you're going after that too.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Nation podcast. For more information about Eric and Larry and Supertech University, please visit us at supertechu.com. That is supertechu, the letter U.com.